All right. Before we start today, just want to give a big shout out to all the Patreon subscribers and all the listeners out there because you guys are responsible for keeping this show going and growing. If you like the show, it's always free. It's always going to be free. I just ask you do me one solid. All right. Just go wherever you listen, give it a review. Make sure you like, subscribe. Give it stars, whatever it is, because I know all the different platforms have different ways of doing it. But if you're on Apple, give it type out a review. If you give it 5 stars and a good review, I'll give you a shout out and read the review on the air. If you want to further support the show, check out patreon.com/bigtruth. That's a way for you as a listener to financially support the show. There's 4 different levels of patronage there, and they all have their own exclusive benefits. But you get things like early access to episodes. You get a chance to ask guest questions, things like that. And I'm working on more things to make it even better for you guys. Giveaways, things like that. And exclusive episodes and furthermore, things like that. If you have if you have a need for artwork, right, whatever it is, you got a blank canvas, you got a blank wall, you need some stuff in your garage, your shop, your tattoo shop, whatever it is, your work, your cubicle, your house, your bathroom, your bedroom, your living room, kitchen, whatever. But especially you got a tattoo shop too. That's an important one because Tattoo Flash Collective's got you covered. They have tattoo flash, but they also have art prints and books and things, all sizes of prints. So it's not just flash size. So, you get a wall size print there, crazy stuff. If you use the promo code Tattoo Flash, if you go to Tattoo Flash Collective and use the promo code Big Truth at checkout, you get 10% off your order. If you are a Patreon subscriber, you get a different code and you get even more off your order. So it pays to be a subscriber. Also, if you are a Massachusetts resident and you find yourself in the unfortunate situation of being in a motorcycle accident, you need to check out the Glassman injury attorneys over at gottagetglassman.com. They are the pit bulls in this world of motorcycle accidents. So, and the thing is even this thing happened last week, but you even got 3 years to go back on. So if something happened to you a couple years ago, someone ran you off the road or rear-sided you or, whatever, hit up Glassman. They will hook you up. And the number is 617-777-7777. Again, 617-777-7777. Also in the show notes, I got links to both Tattoo Flash Collective and Glassman Injury Attorneys. So check them out and use them. If you hit up Glassman, tell them we sent you. All right. If you want more, I'm trying to fly through this. If you want more information on the show itself, go to bigtruthpodcast.com. That's simple. Make sure you click the link on store. Check out the merch. We got a ton of merchandise out there, and it goes on sale pretty regularly. So you never know when you might find T-shirts discounted or hoodies discounted or whatever. But, yeah, check it out, bigtruthpodcast.com. If you want to just go to the store, bigtruthpodcast.com/store. If you are a rider and you want stuff for your motorcycle, hit up my shop, Chopperhead Customs. We're located on 13 County Road, East Freetown, Massachusetts. It's a full brick and mortar motorcycle shop. So if you come in here, we got a parts counter, we got a showroom, we have a big shop out back where we do everything from an oil change to build you a fully custom bike from the ground up, whatever you want, everything in between. It's not just a lifestyle company. It is the lifestyle. Check us out. If you are not local, go to Chopperhead at CHOPPAHEAD.com. We got a bunch of stuff online, a bunch of apparel, swag, riding gear. And as far as parts go, it's hard for me to put every part because, as you know, Harley has a lot of different models and there's a lot of different manufacturers that make all kinds of things for every model, and the models switch every few years and blah, blah, blah. So I can't put everything online, but I can get you whatever you want. So if you don't see it on the site, give us a call, 508-995-6764. Shoot us an email. You can find that right on the website, chopperhead.com. And without further ado, we're going to just jump into it right now.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
Yes, once again, we have liftoff, and I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Big Truth Podcast. And I'm stoked to announce my guest today, who's a legend in the music industry. You may have seen his documentary. What is it? Who the fuck is that guy? And even if you don't know him, you know the bands that he has brought to light, and we're going to hear about that and all the work behind that. So without further ado, I want to welcome Michael Alago to the show today. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, pretty good. I fell asleep earlier.
No problem.
I was just like sitting on the sofa, and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, I forgot.
Yeah,
I gotta go to the computer right now." It's all good. Everything's good. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. And don't worry. The same thing. If I sit on my sofa for more than 5 minutes, I'm out. And so
Correct.
I got like a 5 to 10 minute window of like watching anything or reading or doing anything before I'm just out for the count.
It's like if I start watching something really late, I'll see the credits.
Yeah.
And then I'm asleep.
Yeah, I get it, man. And I use like. What are you up to nowadays? We're gonna get into your history and everything, but are you still out there grinding, or are you just kind of, what are you doing nowadays?
Oh, what am I doing nowadays? Well, I don't officially work in the music business anymore.
Yeah.
I did A&R for almost 25 years.
Yeah.
From like 1980 to 2005. After that. After 2005, I get a phone call from Cyndi Lauper, and she asked me to work with her on a dance album. And then, around 2010, I get that same phone call from Cyndi Lauper and asked me to work on a blues album with her. And I did that as well. We made an incredible record called Memphis Blues, and it got nominated for a Grammy for Best Contemporary Blues Album. It didn't win, but it signaled to us that we did great work.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what you asked me, though. Oh, yeah. What am I doing now?
Yeah, I know you were doing photography and stuff, but
yeah. So I do help young artists out who are unsigned if I love them, But like I said, I don't officially work in the business anymore. I take photographs. I have a couple of books that I'm kind of working on at the moment. One is a photography book of men that I took in the 1990s. They're Polaroids.
Okay.
And another one is a black and white book that I want to put together of a lot of rock musicians and flowers and graffiti. And I've been taking those pictures on an application called Hipstamatic. You can get it on the iPhone.
Yeah.
And I love black and white portraits, and I love anything that's in a square. So I'm kind of working on that as well. And even though I'm not officially in the business, I still go out and hear artists all the time.
Sure. So just to go back, Hipstamatic is one of my favorite apps because they have so many old, like vintage kind of like filters and
it's nuts.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't use it as much, and you just saying it right now, remember that triggered, like, I got to pull that back up and I got to update it because I haven't used it in probably a year or two, but I used to use that all the time, especially when photographing bikes because we build a lot of old bikes, and I like to take like a nice 1960s or 1950s looking photo of that bike, and that app was key for that.
I generally like anything black and white because of the sense of atmosphere.
Yeah.
Especially
with the subject matter that you have, like music stuff always looks good in black and white. Like just city stuff always looks good in black and white. Flowers you usually don't see in black and white, but that's probably makes it more interesting, right? Because you're used to like colorful pictures.
My flower pictures are kind of amazing in black and white because flowers and because of the sense of like drama, like it has a dramatic look, a flower.
Sure.
Or it can. The way I take it, a picture of it.
Yeah. So why don't we go back to the beginning here, because you were an A&R rep in the time when like the music industry was like you were there like right at the tail end of it when it was like the music industry like labels were still selling records and CDs and vinyl, like hard copies. It wasn't all digital and like, like it was still like it was a whole different industry than it is now. And, in some ways it was like, it seemed almost like bigger. But even though like now, like it's easier for a small band to get bigger outreach, but like if you were a big band back then, it was like a way different vibe or way different business or way different industry than it is now, and that's always fascinating to me. And just just general, like New York in the 80s and 90s and in early 2000s is a whole different place than it is now. Like a lot of the culture and the cool things are gone, and been more sterilized, but you were there from the get-go. So how did you, and for those that don't know, just the cliff notes is this is the guy that signed Metallica. He signed Cyndi Lauper. He signed Rob Zombie.
I didn't I signed Metallica. I signed Metal Church. I signed Flotsam and Jetsam. I worked twice with Cyndi Lauper. Okay. I signed the Misfits in 1999 to Geffen Records, and we made a great record called American Psycho.
Yeah.
There's a New York band that I love. They're like a noise band called Swans.
I remember the Swans. A lot of droning beats on.
Like they are droning, but I purposefully made a quiet, beautiful record with them called The Burning World.
Yeah.
I also worked with, did I say White Zombie? Kane Roberts from Alice Cooper's band. Yeah. So, I was busy.
Yeah.
But from the get-go, I grew up in Brooklyn, and as a little kid, I knew I wanted to do something in music, but as a little kid, I didn't know like exactly what that would be.
What attracted you to that? Why did you think you were going to do something in music? Was it just like a passion?
It was a feeling, As a young kid, I would listen to AM radio, and there was a station that I loved called 77 WABC, and there was a DJ, Dan Ingram, and he would play things like twice, like an instant replay. Okay. And so you got to hear everything from like Grand Funk Railroad and Todd Rundgren to Aretha Franklin. And back then, late 70s, radio didn't have a format the way stations are formatted these days, where you hear the same thing, you hear the same songs. You hear literally the top 40 morning, noon, and night. So as a young kid, I listened to radio a lot. I was a bit of a loner. I used to sit on my stoop playing 45 RPMs, and I hope your listeners know what 45s are.
Yeah, everyone does. They're popular again,
as is vinyl, albums. So I grew up in Brooklyn. So by the time I'm, let's say, 19, I graduated from high school, and I started going to the School of Visual Arts for photography. And so now we're talking, it's 1979, 1980. And I also work in a pharmacy on Astor Place in the East Village. So one day, and I talk about this in my film, Who the Fuck Is That Guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago.
Yeah. Shout out to Drew Stone. Drew's a good dude.
Drew Stone directed, Michael Alex produced. And we could talk about that later because it's like the little train that could.
Yeah.
It has a life of its own. So anyway, it's 1980, and I'm going to School of Visual Arts. I just repeated myself.
That's fine.
And so one day, I'm walking in the East Village down 11th Street, going to get some lunch, and I see a beautiful building, and on the buildings there was a little white piece of paper that said video club opening, resumes wanted. And I thought, video club, what the F is that? But keep in mind, 1980 was the beginning of MTV, and the world is starting to change musically. So I went into this building, and it's Art Deco, and it's really kind of beautiful. And I'm just looking around, and a man in the balcony, which I liken Jerry Brandt, God rest his soul, to the Wizard of Oz. And he was like, "Kid, what do you want? We're not open. We're not even open as a club yet." I was like, "Oh, I love this building. Video club, music. I think I want a job here." And he laughed in my face, and he said, "Come upstairs." So I went upstairs to his office, and we start talking about music, all kinds of music, from the Great American Songbook from the 40s and 50s to what was going on in 1980, the punk and underground scene in New York. And at one point in the conversation, he said, "Kid, I'm going to give you a job. You're going to open my mail, you're going to get my lunch, and you're going to answer my phone. And I thought, oh my God, I'm in the music business. But really, it was the beginning. I was 19 years old, and this man was name was Jerry Brandt. Little did I know that back in the day, he worked in the William Morris agency mailroom with another very famous man, David Geffen.
Yeah.
And they were in the mailroom, and they elevated themselves, obviously, to other positions. I didn't know that Jerry had helped bring the Rolling Stones to the United States. He managed the singer-songwriter Carly Simon, and he was kind of like famous he worked with Sam Cooke and Muhammad Ali. So I'm glad I didn't know any of that going into this little interview.
Sure, because you didn't have that nervousness or no intimidation.
Yeah. So I got the job. I worked at the Ritz, which, if y'all don't know, the Ritz is now Webster Hall on East 11th Street between 3rd and 4th Avenue. So I had that job for 3 years. I learned a bunch. I was like a young sponge. I listened to Jerry on the phone with booking agents, learning how to book a 1,500-seat room. I did that for 3 years. Then at some point, I don't know, I just kind of felt like there was more. So a good friend of mine, Mitchell Krasnow, said, Michael, my dad is leaving Warner Brothers and he's going to revamp Elektra because it was like in the crapper. So I thought, well, if you want to introduce me to your dad, Bob Krasnow, I would love to meet him. So I met Bob Krasnow and I had that same conversation with Bob that I had with Jerry, except Bob loved art. And at the time in New York, there was a great underground art scene happening with people like Keith Haring, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Richard Hambleton, and the list goes on. So I had this conversation with Bob. He shook my hand. He goes, I'll give you a bell soon. So about 2 weeks later, I hear from him, and he said, Michael, I'm going to hire you, and you're going to be in the A&R department. And so call Human Resources and let them know that we spoke. Well, I got off the phone and I almost like cried thinking that, I had tears in my eyes because I thought like, oh my God, this is all starting to happen. And so then I called a friend of mine who was in the music business and I said, what's A&R? Well, again, I was like laughed at. And of course, I learned very quickly that A&R means artist and repertoire. Artist and repertoire, that division of the record company is the most important department there is. If you don't sign extraordinary artists who have something to say and who don't sell records, you're out. Well, I was young and determined. And, Bob Krasnow let us A&R people either sink or swim. I was going to fucking swim.
Yeah.
And I did. So I don't know. Where do you want to go from here?
So how do you go? What were you, like 22 or something at the time?
Yeah, maybe I was like 21, 22 years old. Sure. Yeah. And
so you get your foot in the door. You're hired to be to work in the A&R department.
Yes.
How do you go from that to signing your first band? Like, you know what I mean? Like how did?
Well, I signed a little band who were friends of mine called Shrapnel. And later on, the people in Shrapnel were either in Monster Magnet or the Masters of Reality, Daniel Ray, Dave Windor, Phil Caivano. We made a little EP and it really didn't do any business. But what that taught me was don't sign your friends.
Yeah.
I learned a lesson. So now time is going by. It's 1983 and I meet a gentleman named Johnny Z. And Johnny ran a little label called Megaforce Records with his wife, Marcia, and God rest their soul as well. I mean, so many people are like going these days. It's heartbreaking. Anyway, so John and I became fast colleagues. And he played me some vinyl. My brain almost stopped. Yeah. He played me some vinyl that he was putting out, like Anthrax, Raven, and Metallica. So when John came to my office one day, he said, Michael, I have this band, Raven, and they're going to be huge. And I'd like you to give me some money for them. Can you demo them for Elektra? I said, sure. I don't know. I gave him like $5,000, and I said, give me your 5 best songs. And the demos were great. But the problem was I heard Kill 'Em All, and I thought, I'd never heard anything like this before. It was not traditional metal. And I thought, I have to have these people in my life.
Yeah.
So to make a long story short, or maybe longer, I let John know that I didn't want to sign Raven, that I wanted to sign Metallica. It infuriated him. And at some point, he was like, I'm suing you. I'm suing Time Warner. I'm suing Krasnow. And I was like, calm down. You know what I mean? This is all going to work out. Well, of course it worked out. And I guess, not I guess, I'm sorry, summer of 84, the day after Hetfield's birthday, I think it was August 4th, 1984, I signed them to Elektra. It wasn't that simple, but that night was also the night they played with Raven and Anthrax at Roseland Ballroom on West 52nd Street. And it doesn't exist Roseland anymore, which pisses me off because, you know, we New York, we don't have respect for architecture and buildings and just stuff like other cities and European cities have. Anyway, so at one point they tore down Roseland. But the point is, I did sign Metallica in 84. And so, you know, I was really drunk that night, as I always was back then. And I went backstage. I was hugging and kissing everybody. And they were looking at me like, okay. And I had met Lars previously. And like maybe the previous year, because I went to see them. I had other business to do in San Francisco, and I gave Lars my card, and he had some little card that he gave me as well. So by the time 84 came around, he called me and he said, are you still interested in my band? I said, of course I am. Fast forward to Roseland, and it was really a fun night. I think they looked at me backstage like, this is the man we're going to put our lives into the hands of the man that we're going to put lives into. And Lars was like, yes, this is Michael Alago from Elektra. Well, after that night, I don't know, everybody said their goodbyes. And the next day they were at my office at Elektra. We were in the conference room. We had, I tell the story all the time. We had beer and Chinese food. And I gave them all the cassettes and vinyl of artists that I thought they would like the Doors, the Stooges, the MC5, maybe I might have given them the Cars, like a whole host of things, so they would get a vibe of what Elektra Records was like. I left the conference room to get Krasnow. He came in, and he was the chairman, the $10,000 suit, the fancy the cigar, and he was like, listen, you guys were great last night, because I had him come to Roseland as well. And if Michael wants you here, we want you here. And that really was the beginning of it all. And with Metallica and Elektra Records.
And so how, while we're on the Metallica subject, like how like involved were you in like the creation of like, the early Elektra Records? Were you in the studio with them? Were you, or was it?
They never wanted anyone in the studio with them.
Yeah.
I just had to stay aware of the budgets, and I would get, back then we had DATs, these little
I remember DATs. Yeah.
Lars would send me DATs of parts of songs. Our relationship really began with Master of Puppets, because by the time I wound up actually pen to paper, they had made Ride the Lightning, and Megaforce put it out at some point, and then we put it out.
Okay.
So the real record that we started to work with them with was Master of Puppets, which, as we all know, is an extraordinary record.
Yep.
There's a lot of history behind that record, both good and sad. And so no, they really didn't want anyone in the studio with them. But the reason I had blind faith in them was because I heard and Justice for All. I heard Kill 'Em All. I heard Ride the Lightning, and I thought, these are young people who have a point of view, who they definitely know what they want to do in the recording studio. So I kind of had blind faith that this next record would be great.
Yeah.
And with each record, they just kept upping the ante with their songwriting. So as we all know, and we all know all those records, they just got better and better. And, to think that right now in 2024, I signed them 40 years ago. They're on a worldwide tour playing stadiums. And I don't know, life is good.
Yeah. And so even so to rewind a little bit before that, like
Sure.
you like obviously as an A&R guy, but also as just a music aficionado and a lover of music, like, and given New York City at the time, you were probably involved just in a lot of bouncing around to a lot of clubs, seeing a lot of bands, and like I know, I saw the documentary that you did, and with Drew and stuff. So I know you were there for a lot of the early punk stuff, like CBs and stuff, and A7 and everything. But like going from like being a kid in Brooklyn, listening, and obviously you're a lover of all kinds of music, which is an important thing. And anyone I know that's super involved in music, like as an artist, they don't just listen to the type of music they play. They have an appreciation and love for all kinds of music. Yeah. But like, how did you find your way into like those underground worlds? And then like going from punk to like early thrash, there was a lot of overlap there, but there was also discord at the time. Like the punk kids didn't, at the beginning, you might remember the punk kids and the metal dudes didn't always get along, and they were kind of two different worlds. And then later it kind of meshed more together. But like, what was that like for you, like navigating those worlds as
Well, I think we have to maybe backtrack again one more time. Yeah. Growing up in Brooklyn, I would come into the city to see my father at work on the weekends. And there was a newsstand, and I noticed there was a newspaper there called The Village Voice.
Yep.
And it had music and real estate and pornography and theater. It was an incredible newspaper. And I managed to just start looking at all the music stuff in there, and I thought, oh, there's this club called CBGB. This is around 1976, and I might have been only like 16 years old, and I loved the things that I read in there. They would take out what would they take out? My brain stopped again.
Like those little strip ads, like the quarter page ads.
They would take out full page strip ads. Yeah. And when I would see things like the Dead Boys and Suicide and Cherry Vanilla and all these people, I thought, well, this sounds really interesting. Yeah. So I started to go to CBGB, and I was only 16. And back in the day, they didn't card people. And I was 16. I looked like I was 12 and a half. And I practically lived at CBGB. It was my home away from home. And I literally was there all the time. From early on, I think one of my first shows was seeing Johnny Thunders and from the New York Dolls, Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers, to the Dead Boys, and fast forward to the very last night of CB's, I was hanging out with Danny Fields, who is legendary, who discovered the Ramones and the Stooges, and I was with Jim Carroll, the poet, and also David Peel, who made a record way back in the day called Have a Marijuana. So we were all there October 15th, 2006, for the last night of CB's, and Patti Smith performed that evening. So early on, I was going to CBGB. I was going to Max's Kansas City. Yeah. I was going anywhere that I could go to hear music, because I've always been curious about all kinds of music. And so we'll fast forward a little bit. It's now 1983. I know we're going back and forth. So I get my job, and I have an incredible assistant. Her name is Tony. So we got newspapers from everywhere, from Dallas, Austin, Toronto, Montreal, Boston, Rhode Island, LA, San Francisco, all the music places. And part of her job was to go to the music section of all those places, of all those newspapers, and just check out to see what looked and sounded interesting. And so she would cut out all this stuff while I was in my office listening to unsigned music. Yeah. The unsigned music came from lawyers and managers, some artists themselves, and publishers. I don't think I ever signed anything from any of those boxes of cassettes.
Yeah.
But
The unsolicited demo box. Yeah.
oh my God. I mean, recently somebody had approached me and said, I played you my demo back in the day, and unfortunately you sent me a rejection letter that I kept. Do you remember? And I had to apologize to this poor fuck because I was like, dude, I'm lucky I remember my name, what I did yesterday or last week. So sorry. I listened to thousands of things over the course of almost 25 years, whether I was at Elektra or whether I was at Geffen. So, so my brain right this minute is not as good as it used to be. But, it was all fucked up back then because I used to drink and drug a lot. I don't know how I never got fired from a company, and I never got fired from a record I was working on. But I don't drink or drug anymore. It's, going to be 17 years next month.
Yeah, congratulations.
So that's a plus.
Congratulations on that, yeah.
So I don't know what your question was because I probably went on for way too long.
Actually, I don't remember it either. I think we were just talking about the early days of in New York, when you were a kid, just navigating the music scene. And this, New York was a different animal then. There was just a lot more grassroots. There was a lot more stuff just popping off left and right. And and there's small clubs, there's mid-sized clubs, there's big clubs, there's all kinds of things to go around. So we were just talking about that, the early days of that.
So, being a young person, underage, I would take the train from Brooklyn into the city. I had my little knapsack with my Minolta camera, and I would be on an adventure. Yeah. And I usually did all of this on my own. Back then, they called New York Fear City.
Yeah.
The city was fabulous and dirty and scary. But, as a young person, I had no fear. I had no idea why. I was just curious, and I wanted to go hear the music wherever I could go hear the music. Yeah. And if you really want to backtrack, where it all started was when I was 13 years old. My cousin's boyfriend, Manny the Greek from Astoria, that's what we called him, took me to see Alice Cooper at Madison Square Garden. That was June 3rd, 1973. It was the last night of the $1 Billion Babies tour, and that kind of changed my life forever. Yeah. I knew, it was like, oh my God, this is what live music is really like. So from an early age, I loved all kinds of music. So once I got into my job at Elektra, I went into everything with an open mind.
Sure. And sorry, man, something just went down my throat wrong. Also just something that was funny that you mentioned, the first time I went to CB's, I was 16 as well, because I lived in Massachusetts. We took the bus out there to New York and then navigated around the city. Back then, just getting to the venue was a little adventure in itself. And you never mind the sketchy stuff that happened at the venue or the show, especially punk or hardcore shows, but just getting there was an adventure in itself. So I imagine with the camera, you must have a lot of cool stuff like that you got.
I did take lots of pictures back then, but I'd probably get off the train someplace like Broadway Lafayette. I would walk east on Bleecker Street, and you couldn't, once you got on Bleecker Street walking east, you couldn't get any further than the Bowery because you'd run right into CBGB. I mean, was like a T.
Yeah.
So it was like not that I was scared, but there were scary elements of a young kid walking down these dark, drunk streets. Never mind, if I wasn't drunk, there were lots of drunks all over the place on the Bowery because it was pretty funky back then.
Yeah. So after Metallica, so Metallica was the second band you signed?
Yes.
Shrapnel, then Metallica?
Yes.
and then after that, who was next?
Metal Church, Flotsam and Jetsam.
Yeah.
A cool story with Flotsam is that they made a record called Doomsday for the Deceiver on Brian Slagle's label, Metal Blade. I don't think they were continuing with that label, and so Jason Newsted was and still is a very ambitious guy, and he sent me his that record, and I loved it. But also at that point in time, around 86, Master of Puppets had came out. Metallica were on the road in Europe, and there was that fatal accident of their bus turning over in Sweden, and it killed Cliff Burton. So at some point, wait, I think it's getting dark in here. I don't know if this helps at all.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Oh, it definitely helps.
It's
Okay.
some mood lighting. Some mood lighting.
Oh my God, there was mood lighting, and now there's no more mood lighting. Anyway, so unfortunately, that late September, Cliff was killed on the bus, and it was like we were all young people in our early 20s, and it was like, for me, it was an artist that I worked with that was killed, and for the band members, it was like their brother, because they were tight, and we all mourned for a long time, and at one point, Lars called me on the phone because at first they thought, are we going to continue doing this or what? And they had their own private talks, and they decided they're going to move forward, and could I help them find a bass player? Well, I just knew from the get-go, I didn't want to screw up Flotsam's life, but I just knew that Jason was that person for them. And by the way, Brian Slagle also suggested Jason to the band. So he went, he did his audition, and he got the job. And for the next bunch of years, they treated him like crap because it was like, you're not Cliff.
Yeah.
It's like, don't try it, man. You're not Cliff. But he got the job. He did it beautifully. He was in the band, I think, almost 17 years. And the rest is history. So I signed a whole bunch of artists from Metallica, Metal Church, Flotsam. At one point, I left Elektra and I went to Geffen, and I signed White Zombie. I signed Kane Roberts. I made this record, American Psycho, with the Misfits. In between all that, there was I went to a little label called Uni, and it was a label that was around like in the 60s. I think they had like Neil Diamond or something like that. And and on that label, we had the singer-songwriter Steve Earle, and he made a record called Copperhead Road. There was a kind of a punk pop band from the UK called Transvision Vamp, fronted by Wendy James. And then I made a record with New York band Swans that Bill Laswell produced. And we made a really beautiful record. And I wanted to make a quiet record with them on purpose because, their records previous had been relentless, which I love all that stuff, but I just wanted to do something different. So we made a record called The Burning World, and it was really beautiful. So I don't know where you want to go right now with all of this.
Well, how about this? Because before we get into to later stuff, like you were an A&R at at Elektra, and then also Geffen at the
I was at Elektra. I was at Geffen. I was at Elektra. I was at Geffen.
Oh, you were going back and forth. Yeah.
Correct, because I was like a little nuts, and I felt like after I signed Metallica that I wasn't really being treated with the respect I wanted and the money that I wanted.
Sure.
And Kraz just. I love Bob Krasnow, rest in peace as well. But he still treated me like a little kid, like his little kid. And I was young, but you know what? I was making millions for Elektra Records and Time Warner.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was like one of those A&R people who were the talk of the town. So Geffen called me, and they were going to give me good money. And Geffen was also a well-respected, they were like a boutique label distributed by a major, So over there, they were signing stuff like Whitesnake and Sonic Youth and Guns N' Roses and Beck. So I came in and I wound up signing, like I just told you, White Zombie, Kane Roberts, and Misfits.
Yeah, but so. Yeah, and you can get into it as much as you want or not, but like I know the 80s was a wild time. You're a kid in your 20s. You just signed Metallica. You signed like you made one of the best, you were involved in making one of the best metal records ever with Master of Puppets. What are some of the stories, like, if you can, like how wild were those times for you as like 20, like all of a sudden, like you were working at a club, being someone's assistant, and then now you're an A&R, your second band in is like the home run of home runs, is a grand slam. Like, how did your life change? Like, and is that why you were like, and I know you said that, you used to be out boozing and drugging a lot. Like, I'm sure that came with the industry and everything, and just being out all the time. But like, how wild were the times back then? Like,
Well, the times were wild, and I was even wilder.
yeah.
I was out every night, and when Metallica were in town, we were out all the time.
Yeah.
And you remember that they called them Alcoholica for a reason. But I don't even know how to describe it. I was literally out every night hearing music. Yeah. That was my job. I loved every waking moment of it. But there's only so long one can drink and, do drugs, and before your life and your brain and your showing up starts to fall apart. But it was a very exciting time in New York. There were so many clubs. There was so much great art also in the city, tons of art galleries in Soho. But like I said, I was just out every night. Yeah. Going out every night started when I was a kid, going to CB's and Max's and Hurrah's up on 62nd Street, all these great places. And like I said, that was my job, to scout talent.
Now, did you ever find anything from just like, I know you guys did a lot of research, like looking at papers and seeing like, anything that sounded interesting, but anything that, just being out and about, like a band you discovered, just like seeing at a small club and you're like, these guys got something?
Not really. Because, and I always say to the people that I heard a lot of good music.
Yeah.
Music that good is not great.
Yeah.
So I really, I knew to focus my ears on what I felt was greatness. Yeah. And that meant that if I saw you live, you better be great. You better have charm. You better have charisma. You better know how to deal with an audience. You better have something to say in your songs so that they would have universal appeal. Because remember, I wasn't working for like an independent label. No. I was working for Time Warner, and I was at Elektra. Like I said, it's do or die, because you can't have stuff sell like halfway. You really got to go out there and get them. And if I'll tell you a funny story, if I want to fast forward, when I got to Geffen Records, I knew about White Zombie because they lived on East 10th Street in the East Village, and I would hang out with Rob and Sean and the band, and we would go out all the time together, and I knew that they had something. I saw them at a little club on Lafayette Street in the East Village. It was like a little black box. I don't even know if it had a name. The stage was like this high off the ground, and I went to the back of this it wasn't even like a venue. I don't know what you call it. And
it's like a pop-up club, like a pop-up club, like a pop-up venue.
Sure, like for lack of a better word, back then, a pop-up club. Yeah. And they were performing, and they were like sweating, and their dreadlocks were like flying all over the place and stuff. And I thought, I love these people. They didn't have one damn song. And I thought, I love these people, and I got to do something with them. So I don't remember how long before I signed them that we were friends, and we also would go out every night, and we would drink a lot. And they would come to my apartment, and we would sit on the floor, and we would watch blaxploitation pictures and watch DVDs of the Carpenters. And there was a famous little film out about Karen Carpenter. It was on VHS. And everyone in the film was Barbie dolls. And it was hysterical. And we would watch stuff like that, like really like out there stuff. And we would blend vodka and Jaeger in a blender and make White Russians, and we would just like hang around like every night and do stuff like that. So I did finally sign them, and And I had to have a long talk with them about songs and song structuring, and we made a demo with this artist named Jim Thirlwell, who goes under the name Fetus, and sometimes it's Fetus. You've got fetus on your breath, fetus under glass, fetus uberalis. Anyway, he made a demo with them that was fabulous, but he had an ego, and Rob had an ego, so it didn't work. I wound up signing them, and this is all thanks to my friend Daniel Ray, who at the time was shopping Circus of Power, Raging Slab, and White Zombie. And the other two band got signed to RCA, and nobody wanted White Zombie, but I didn't give a shit because I thought these people are going to be friggin' big. Yeah. So I make the first album with them, La Sexorcista, Devil Music Volume 1. Andy Wallace produced the record. We hired Andy Wallace because we loved the sound of Slayer records. And the record comes out sometime in 92. So I'm at a marketing meeting on, Monday or Wednesday afternoon in LA. And I'm like, this band's going to be huge. They're going to sell 1 million copies out of the box, blah, blah, blah. Talking crap about my band. Yeah. And, at one point, the record comes out, and I think it stalls at like 180,000. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because, Geffen was doing their job. They were marketing and promoting. And then a little thing happened, which was you can't buy, I guess, good luck like this. Yeah. These two crazy little characters called Beavis and Butthead that Mike Judge created decided that White Zombie is their favorite band. So they would play that first video all the time on MTV, and really that helped skyrocket it to 1 million units. Those little rotten characters who were out of their bird, you would think they were on drugs all the time. Talked about them endlessly. And like I said, that's what happened with that first album. It was really such a fun time, you know? Yeah.
So it's wild, right? So White Zombie, you saw the greatness in them, not because of the music, because of them.
Well, there was yes, because of them. I loved Rob on stage. Yeah. He's a character. And Shauna, she was beautiful. And like I said, they had such a charisma on stage.
Like a presence.
And Jay and Ivan, you just wanted to look at them and go, oh my God, like your eye would just dart all over the place. And I just, for me, I love the noise because I'm a big proponent of noise.
Sure. Well, you put out a Swans record.
I did. And, these days, I love stuff like, I listen to artists like Black Anvil and Black Braid and Necrofire and blah, blah, blah. No. So where are we going with all of this?
Oh, you were just talking about kind of the story behind White Zombie, and it was like,
there you go. You got a good story about the White Zombie.
And then it was really Beavis and Butthead that catapulted them into
that really catapulted to 1 million plus units. And like I said, you can't buy press like that.
No, that's wild.
It was like the timing.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Beavis and Buttheads were the influencers of the 80s and 90s.
Yes, they were influencers.
They could make or break you. Yeah.
I still always want to know what kind of drugs they were on.
I remember they did that to they loved the Biohazard video too, but it didn't catapult them as far as White Zombie.
Oh, how funny. Okay, I don't remember that, but sounds about right.
Yeah, but so yeah, we were just talking about the wildness of that time and then.
I'm sorry. The wildness of that time is because it was the 80s and everything was allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with everything being allowed, I just took it to the hilt.
Yeah. So, how did you end up getting? I know outside, and I know it was probably a thing for you because as a fan of music, you liked all kinds of music or loved all kinds of music, and you kind of caught your stride with metal, but you were also working on other projects outside of the metal stuff. Like you like I said, you've worked with Cyndi Lauper other bands, but like, how did you end up with like doing stuff with like Cyndi? I know she was a fixture down in the Village at the time, but like, how did you end up working with her and artists like that?
She had her band Blue Angel back then, and in the 80s, I actually booked them at the Ritz. Her manager, Lisa Barbaris, who is still her manager this very second, managed her maybe not as far back as Blue Angel, but someplace in the 80s. Lisa then wound up doing publicity for both Elektra and Geffen, and we've stayed friends this whole time.
Yeah.
So we're fast forwarding to around 2005, 2009. I've already done my stint in the business for 25 years. I was in rehab. I no longer drank. And one day Cyndi calls and says, I'm making a dance record. Could you, I know in that voice of hers, I know you know how to make, Metallica records and metal records, but could you make a dance record with me? So I was the A&R person for her record called Bring It to the Brink. And it's a really solid record. I love it. And so we worked well together, which then led to 2010 when I got that same phone call from Cyndi, and she said, I'm going to make a blues album. Do you want to help me? And I thought this is going to be challenging. And I said yes. And so I would go to her place. She lives on the Upper West Side here in Manhattan. And we would sit in her kitchen, eat Chinese food. Chinese food is a big thing with Nate. And we would sit and on the computer, on vinyl box sets of blues recordings, CDs. We just covered the waterfront with blues music. And, we were looking for tunes that were from a woman's point of view. So, we found all these songs. We found a great producer in Memphis named Scott Bomar. He was in a band called the Bo Keys, and a real cool guy, young guy back then, maybe 40 years old. And we went down to meet him. I think Cyndi went in the studio with him for not really demo purposes, but just to check him out. Sure. We wound up hiring Scott. He made this extraordinary record, Memphis Blues. I don't know if I mentioned this when the camera was on or off, but we made this record, and it's extraordinary. And like I said, it was up for Best Contemporary Blues Album at the Grammy Awards, and it didn't win, but like I said, it signaled that we did great work.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to, or I hoped that I did great work with artists.
Sure. Did it become, when you became sober, did it become more of a challenge to be in that A&R role, or is that why you kind of get out, or what?
Well, let's see. Sober, I was sober. Yeah. Because my brain is shot. Yeah. So I do remember most of my life. Yeah. Anyway, at Elektra, I wound up going to rehab, and I stayed sober. Well, what they call dry, because I never went to 12-step meetings. I didn't do any of that because I wasn't going to go. But I stayed sober. And at one point in time, I did start drinking again and doing drugs in a big major way. So, yeah, by the time I got sober in 2007, I was still, I wasn't active in the business anymore professionally, but I still went out all the time. Okay. And it was tough because, I'm still in New York. I'm still going out. Everybody's like, do you want a beer? And, I had to say no. And I've said no for 17 years now because, I had my time doing all that. And it really did almost kill me. I wound up getting HIV. And when there was no medication back then, and at one point I was on my sofa, literally dying. And I had a great doctor, and she was totally fabulous. And she worked in the laboratories, and she got me better. And I never got sick again like that, thank God. And, I'm really, I'm going to be 65 next month, believe it or not. And I'm going to have 17 years clean and sober. And, my health just couldn't be better than it is now. And that's because I cut the drinking shenanigans out. Yeah. And, It's nice to wake up in your own bed. It's nice to wake up and
know where you are, even just
or what you did last night. Because back then, once I woke up and I would see on those, those micro cassettes on your answering machine, it would like say 15, and I thought, oh, there are 15 messages on here. Yeah. What did I do last night? And inevitably, there was like, you were rude to so-and-so's wife. You really need to call them and say, I'm sorry. So there was stuff like that all the time. I'm glad that I recognized at some point that I couldn't do this anymore. It was harmful to my mind, my body, my soul. And I just thought, you know what? Life is too good and I want to live. So like I said, I just stopped at one point in time. And, it's like even when Mom died and people were like, oh, I'm sorry to hear about your mom. Do you want to go out drinking? No, I want to live. I want to live through this. Yeah. I want to feel everything. So drinking means nothing to me anymore. And I'm glad that it doesn't, because I love experiencing things with a very clear, sober mind.
And when and that's awesome. And like, you seem like a very healthy, energetic guy for 65, right? So that's awesome. I think in a way, like, being involved in music so much, I think that keeps us all a little bit young. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
It's the total Peter Pan, right? Because it's like we're doing kid stuff, like it's music. You know what I mean? It's like, but what were some of the biggest challenges for you? And I'm not asking you to spill the beans on like people that might have been problematic to work with, but like as an A&R person going through that, you've worked with a whole different consortium of people. Like, what were some of the biggest like challenges to you through the years? Like what was some of the tough records that ended up like working out or things like that?
All artists can be a pain in the ass, but it's part of their artistry. It's part of their point of view. And if I'm signing you because I feel you are that special and you have great songs, nothing is going to be, smooth sailing. Sure. I don't know how else to say it. Yeah. But, I never really had problems with the artists that I worked with. And I would never forgive myself if I didn't say, one of the people that I worked with back in the day was Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols. Yeah. I worked with him when he changed his name to John Lydon. I helped co-sign him to Elektra around that same time period, 1986, 1988. And we made a record called Album. Bill Laswell, who produced Swans for me, produced that record as well. And everything about that record, the marketing was friggin' genius. Because if you looked at the album cover, it said album. The cassette said cassette.
Yeah, I remember that.
CD,
the pill
poster,
record,
and poster. So it was like really very clever. Yeah. And here we are in 2024, and I'm still friends with John, and it's 43 years that I'm friends with him, and we never had a bad word. And somebody, he's even in my documentary. Yeah. And people say, well, how do you not have a bad word with Johnny Rotten? It's because I don't act stupid around him. I don't constantly ask him about the Sex Pistols. He's a very forward-thinking kind of guy, and I totally love him. And, our relationship started, and we're going to backtrack one more time to May of 1981. I was booking the Ritz. On the weekend, on Friday and Saturday, we had 2 sold-out shows with the English group Bow Wow Wow. Malcolm McLaren managed them, and one day during that week in May, he called and said, we're not coming. I said, what do you mean you're not coming? He said, well, Annabella is underage, and her mother doesn't want her to come to the States. I was like, Malcolm, she was underage last month. And you booked the friggin' shows, and we sent you a 50% deposit, and you're coming. I'm paying for her mother to come with all of you. And he was like, well, we're not coming. He was really a prick, Malcolm McLaren. So I had to tell Jerry Brandt, my boss, that, and I had to think quickly. I don't know if it was because I was looking through the music paper of the music business, Billboard magazine, and I noticed that Pill were in town to promote their album Flowers of Romance. So there was a woman who did publicity at Warner Brothers. She worked with everyone from Pill to Madonna, everyone. So I don't know how I found out that they were in her office that day. I called and I said, I need to speak to John. My name is Michael Alago. I booked the nightclub downtown, the Ritz, and I would like Pill to play on the weekend. And I thought, what the hell? What am I thinking? So he got on the phone and I said, I'm going to send a car for you and Jeanette and Keith Levine to come down to my office. So they came down to my office one afternoon that week. And they said, well, we're here on a press junket. We don't have instruments and stuff. I said, well, we'll rent a Prophet 5 and program like 45 minutes worth of music into it for Keith to like start playing. And, you'll just have to start singing. Let's just make it work. And so they finally gave in to me and said yes. And that night, the Ritz was also known for having a 30-foot screen in front of the stage.
Yeah.
And remember, because it's 1980, every major label was sending us the videos that they were making for their artists. So that was like a big thing too. Like, wow, seeing all this stuff that was on MTV on this 30-foot screen.
Sure.
So PIL, Public Image Limited, wanted to stay behind the screen. They wanted to make like performance art. Nobody there wanted to hear performance art. They wanted to hear Johnny Rotten in full swing. So all John did was we got into about 18 minutes of Flowers of Romance, and then he peeked out from behind the screen, letting the people know we're never coming out from behind the screen. And he's taunting and teasing the audience, and people really didn't know what to make of it. So they started throwing bottles at the screen. Chairs were flying off the balcony. And I thought, oh my God, what is going on here? So, we had to pull the band off the stage into their dressing room. I think I went on stage just saying, come on, people, you got to stop. There was security. My boss, Jerry Brandt. People were really like not happy.
No.
So it was a pouring rain that night. After 18 minutes of music, people slowly filed out of the Ritz and we closed down. My boss, you would think like Jerry thought like it was my fault. So when I went up to his office, I was like, well, I didn't know that this was going to happen. I said, let's bring him back tomorrow. He was like, get out of my office, out of my office. So that night, I'm backstage with John and Jeanette and Keith, and there was a kid outside the door. He was adorable, and his head was bleeding because he got hit with a bottle. And the only thing he wanted to do was to meet John. So I went into the dressing room. I said, John, there's a kid outside, and he's the only one left in the venue, and his head is like full on bleeding. He said, bring him in. So we brought this kid in. I think he was believe it or not, back then, I think he might have even been a friend of Drew Stone's. Anyway, was his name Jonathan? Whatever. So, we were backstage drinking champagne, doing funny business, illicits. Yeah. And that was the beginning of my friendship with John Lydon in 1981. And we're still friends right now. And that's 43 years later. And we never had a bad word with each other. Yeah. He's so smart. He is the epitome of charisma. I mean, when you see, even if people were young enough, not old enough to see the Pistols back then, thank God there's Google and YouTube, and you can see some of your favorite bands on there because of those platforms. So that's all I have to say. But I did have to mention John because I would be remiss and I would hate myself after doing this conversation with you that if I didn't bring up John Lydon.
Yeah, and that's a very infamous show. That was like the Pill Riot show. That
was a riot. It was a sound heard around the world. It was on the 11 o'clock news. Yeah. This journalist Tim Summer wrote something the next day for, I think, Sounds magazine in the UK. There were 3 publications: Sounds, Melody Maker. Oh my God, I'm forgetting. Sounds, Melody Maker. And the NME, New Musical Express. And they either put John on the cover or did a major profile on the riot. And to this day, I bring it up because it's part of my career.
Sure.
It's part of music history.
Yeah.
And
another thing to file under publicity you couldn't even pay for, right? Like just,
oh, damn right, you could not have. Yeah. So yeah.
Anybody that you had the chance to sign that you didn't, that you missed out on, any regrets through the years? I'm sure there's got to be a couple, or whether they're regrets or not.
That's a funny thing because journalists, podcasters, friends, people always ask me that question, and well, okay, back then, no, because I was very specific about the artists that I signed, and I wasn't into signing every friggin' Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Sure.
But right this minute, if there was an artist I could have signed back then, I always say Slayer. Because I friggin' love Gary Holt. I love Tom. I mean, I next to Metallica, they're like one of my favorite bands. I would go see them everywhere from around 1983. And the only reason, maybe 1986, was because I had already signed Metal Church and they were on gigs with Slayer. Yeah. So I've been seeing them for a long time. But in 2024, if back then I could say to you, if I could sign anybody, who would it be? It would have been Slayer.
Yeah, and when I say because I know you had a stringent kind of set of rules for who you would, you had to see the greatness, but I meant it more was there anyone you didn't see the greatness at the time that you had in your grasp that later on came out and you're like, oh, there's the greatness, you know what I mean? Maybe they didn't have it at the time, or maybe you didn't see it at the time. Was there anyone like that? So I'm not filing it under regrets, but was there anybody that came your way that at the time didn't jive with you, but then later was like, damn, that's good. I should have signed them.
First of all, that's a great question, but you're asking it to someone who has a half of a brain left. Who sometimes, like I said, I remember 40 years ago, but I don't remember last Saturday.
I get it.
I'm sorry I have to answer this. No, I can't even think about that. I don't think about that. And no, I can't think of who that artist might have been who was in a very primitive stage, but then became huge.
Yeah.
I can't put my finger on it for some reason.
Oh, no problem. And so talk a little bit, you have a book out that's an autobiography. And
yes.
What was that process like, writing that?
Yeah.
And
well,
kind of go through that.
We're going to keep backtracking because my life is all about my history in the music business. At some point, because I was sober, director Drew Stone asked to make a film about me. Now, it's a funny thing because I met Drew in 1999 when he was managing Biohazard and a little band that I still love to this day called Sub-Zero. Yeah. And I love the people in Sub-Zero. So I go on the road in 1998 or 9 with the Misfits, and Drew comes on the road with Sub-Zero, who he was managing. All I remember was I fought with everybody on that tour because I was always drunk. So fast forward, I'm sober. Drew knows that I'm sober. And he comes over to my apartment one day and he says, I want to make a film about you. And I thought, well, sure. My ego really liked the idea of a film being made about me. And he's a smart cookie, Drew. And I said yes. And we just started putting together bits and pieces for this film that was going to be called Who the Fuck Is That Guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago. So we put it together, and I was very lucky that I never, even when I didn't work with an artist anymore, I was never on bad footing with any of them, So when I asked James Hetfield and all the guys in Metallica, will you be in my documentary? They said yes. I asked Kurt Vanderhoof from Metal Church. He said yes. I was already friends with Phil Anselmo, but I had nothing to do with him professionally. We were just great pals. So I asked him to be in the documentary, and he's in the documentary. Cyndi Lauper, Rob Zombie, a whole host of artists are in the film because, I always had great relationships with artists. I really, I just did. So we made that film. We got lucky enough to get put on Netflix for 3 years. And also, it was I would hear from people as far away as Germany and Israel to just all the way to, Washington State, the West Coast. Oh man, we love your film and blah, blah, blah. And it's a good film. It's a fun film. And I go through everything from, being a young kid at the Ritz to whenever that film ends in like 2017. So after that, I don't know. I think after those 3 years, 17, 18, 19, 20, 2020 comes along and there's COVID. And but part of the distributors who distributed our film was working with another company. And Peter Spira called us and said, I can get your film out there again. And I was like, oh my God, well, where are you going to put our film now? So now our film is on Amazon Prime, Tubi, Xbox, Google Play, and YouTube. Now, this is like the little engine that could. This is the little film that is it's just out there, and it just keeps going on and on and on. So we've had such good luck and with this film, and I love it that it's still out there. Again, you can't really buy this stuff because a lot of times, you see a documentary and it goes away. And people just love seeing this documentary. They love hearing the stories. And if they didn't know, like, oh my God, why is Philip Anselmo in that movie? They soon find out once they watch it, And people can't believe how sweet John Lydon is in my film,
People have like, it's funny because when you watch these documentaries like yours, people have like preconceived notions of people, and then you see them like really just kind of talking nonchalantly, like, not in a formal kind of setting, and it's like, oh, you get a different feeling, like, and right now there's probably Johnny's got a lot of controversy around him just on his political views, but when you see him, he's like a well thought out, nice,
Oh, this is a smart cookie. I mean, don't fool around with him. Because he'll give it to you, but not in a nasty way. Just that he is that smart that he could
factual,
talk about
logical.
He could talk about politics, and he makes perfect sense.
You were talking about we were going to talk about the book, but you were talking about the movie.
Oh yeah. So the movie. Anyway, so it's like the little train that could. It's still out there. We're on 5 platforms. You can't it's like, wow, this is incredible. And we don't see an end in sight, which is really wonderful. So during that time period, unfortunately, we're in the
lockdowns and shutdowns.
But you know what? I gotta again. We're going backwards because I never know how to tell stories in a linear fashion.
That's fine.
So, it has to be fine because that's the only way my brain works. Anyway, so let's see. The movie is back on all the platforms. I get a phone call from a little company called Backbeat Books, and they asked me if I had more stories. And I thought, do I have more stories? I wasn't even able to tell my Lynyrd Skynyrd story. I wasn't able to tell so many stories that are in the film. The film is about 75 minutes, and we gave everybody like the highlights, the real good stuff. And sometimes they're not so highlights, because of the drinking and the drugging and me getting very, very ill in the 90s. Anyway, so this little company calls me and I decide, sure, I'm going to make a book. So in 2020-ish, during COVID, my little book comes out. It's called I Am Michael Alago, Breathing Music, Signing Metallica, Beating Death. And it's out there, and people are loving it, and I'm grateful for that because, like I said, I talk about everything from growing up in Brooklyn to my mom to most of the artists that I've worked with. And on the back of the book, I decided to put a picture of me and my mom from Brooklyn from 1960. And I got a lot of cool people to write some blurbs, like my friend Danny Fields, Jason Newstead, Gary Holt, and the beautiful Jessica Pimentel from Orange is the New Black. So I've been, it's like a thing, like I've been very blessed. I'm alive. I have people that love me and that I love them. And that, excuse me again, and that, I still speak to the artists that I worked with back in the day. So my life is a miracle and it's a blessing. And, I don't screw around like that anymore. I'm very serious about the things. I mean, that the things that I do, I mean, I know how to have fun, but none of that fun involves, drugs and alcohol.
Sure. So, everybody, if you're listening, because you kind of got the gist of the story here, and it's a super interesting story, and you've led an incredible in life, like both highs and lows are like off the charts, right? But you watch the documentary, you'll get even more context than this, but the book is where you're gonna get the deep dive. And
Sure.
But that'll let you express things more in words that you can't always put in, into a video. Everyone's like, if anyone's seen a movie before, then you read the book, it's a vastly different experience. So even with a biography, It's going to be the same.
Sure. So, and I taught in the book, as well as what I mentioned to you. There's a big chapter on Hazelden, where I went to get sober. So there's a lot of stuff on alcoholism and sobriety in there, because I like to let people know that, even though my life was filled with shenanigans back in the day, drunken shenanigans, drug shenanigans, I lived, and I lived because I cut all the nonsense out.
Yeah.
And I still know how to have fun.
That's awesome. Now, were you always this level of energy, or was it different before?
Oh my God, yes. I don't know how to shut up. Things could go on forever. I love going out every night. I love hearing music. I love going to the Broadway theater. I love going to museums. I love going to art galleries. I walk around everywhere and take, photographs, because, photography is a big thing for me. And hopefully I'm going to have a book out called Polaroid Encounters that will be out for Christmas this year. I'm crossing my fingers. Yeah. I signed with this little company. They're like a punk rock company, believe it or not, called Shining Life Press. And I met these people at a book fair like only months ago. Yeah. And they were like, "Oh my God, are you Michael Alago? Our favorite band is White Zombie." And so that was like what happened. Sure. And this couple, John and Katie, are great people. They have I don't know if you'd call Zach an assistant, but he's part of the team of Shining Life. And, so I had to look them up before I thought about signing with them. And John has this incredible job at the Smithsonian. And Katie has I was going to say hysterical, this important job at National Geographic. And I thought, I like these people. And so I wound up signing with them. And they're in Japan right now on some business. But when they get back on the 20th, we're going to design the book, and hopefully we're going to get it out for Christmas this year.
Yeah. Did you ever cross paths with Ricky Powell? Do you know Ricky Powell?
Wow. Yes, I know who he is, and no. The answer is no.
Because it was like he was, an avid photographer that was involved in the art scene in New York, and he was more on the hip hop side, but also a little bit of the punk side, because it was
photographing all those graffiti trains.
Yeah, and
beautiful.
Same thing with a little camera out there, like I didn't know, because like I have a feeling that some of your and there was a lot of it was black and white, so I feel like some of that photography like essence would translate between you two.
Oh well, no, but even that early, I used to have this little Kodak camera, Kodak 110. It was like this slim.
I remember those, the little rectangular ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would put it in my pocket, and I would take pictures at Max's Kansas City, and I would take pictures at CBGB. And, these things were not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But you know what? Also, what it did have, it had a feeling.
Yeah, 100%.
When you looked at it, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that's Johnny Thunders on the stage of CBGB with Richard Hell. Yeah. It's like none of these things were perfect, but perfection was not. I never looked for perfection, because perfection can wind up being very sterile. Yeah. I just like things that give you a certain love, a certain feeling, a certain atmosphere. And when I get that, I just want to move full speed ahead with the photograph, with the artist, with whatever.
I feel sometimes photography is better in that way than like video or any other kind of art form. Raw photography can give you like the raw emotion more than.
Oh, absolutely. And my pictures, even when I had 3 books out, and none of those pictures are like glossy. But I don't like glossy. I don't want anything to be glossy. I want to have the picture radiate a rawness
Yes.
that they see, so that the viewer is feeling like, wow, that dude looks incredible. Whoa, those are incredible tattoos. Wow, do you see all those scars on his face? I want that to be elicited in the pictures that I take, because anybody can do gloss. Not anybody. There is gloss. There are fashion. Fashion pictures are glossy, but I never wanted to photograph models either, because models, all respect to them, but they're beautiful and they're homogenized, and I never wanted to take any homogenized pictures at all whatsoever. So I didn't.
Yeah. So it's the same respect that you take to your photography you had towards music, right? Like,
Absolutely.
So you got a signing coming up locally here, and I know we got some local
I never
people.
thought we were going to get to it, but yes, I have a book signing coming up at Purchase Street Records in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Yep, right down the road. My man Roger. Roger's been on the podcast before, so shout out to Roger.
Okay,
and Purchase Street.
Shout out to Roger. And for all of you who don't know, I have to look because I don't remember. They're at 53 Pope's Island in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Yep.
Their phone number is 508-287-8688. So I'm going to be there on Saturday afternoon, September 29th, from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 5 o'clock officially. But I'll stay until they throw me out the door. And, in the background, we're going to be playing the documentary all day on some television that we find somewhere.
Right?
And it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. I was at Purchase Street only once with my friend Tom Kelly, who brought me there. And I just loved the store so much. And I got a nice feeling from Raj and Jimmy James, who works there.
Yeah.
So it just felt natural that I said to them, can we do a book signing here? And they said, absolutely. So once again,
there you go. Pick up the book.
We're gonna sell my book there. So if you see this podcast, come on down, say hello, take a picture, and if you like, purchase a book, or just let's shake hands and talk about music.
And I'm gonna go out. I'll be there because it's literally 10 minutes down the road from me. I'm gonna buy 2 books. I'm saying it right now. One for me, but one that I'm gonna give to one of my Patreon subscribers. I'm gonna do a giveaway. So I'll have you sign one and give it to the Patreon, one of the Patreon subscribers. Yeah, it's just a way to give back to them, but also to give back to you for taking time to come on today.
I appreciate that, and it's always about giving back.
Yeah, it's always about supporting all the way around. So I appreciate you coming on today. I know you gave me a lot of time. Anything else before we wrap up? Anywhere where people can find out more information about you? So the documentary's on Tubi. He already listed them all.
It's on Amazon Prime. It's on Tubi. It's on Google Play. It's on Xbox, and it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this, you must have one of those platforms, especially Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
So it's there, and it's going to be on, I don't know for how long. Maybe it'll be on these platforms forever. If people want to find me, they can find me under Michael Anthony Alago on Facebook. I'm there every single day. And I post tons of stuff, from music to spiritual stuff, meditations, thoughts for the day. And you can also find me on Instagram under Michael Anthony Alago. And I'm there all the time as well. So please come and say hello. And I don't know what else to say. I think I talked too much to begin with.
No, not at all. And the book is available on Amazon, I'm assuming.
It's available now. Oh, yeah. It's available on Amazon. But you can also purchase it from me if you write to me. And I could the stuff on Amazon is not signed. But if you purchase it from me, I'll sign it, and that's always a little nicer.
Absolutely. It's always better to get it direct from the person too, anyway, because you cut out some middleman or whatever. But we'll get into that. And if you don't have any of those platforms,
I make an extra $1.
Yeah. But if you don't have any of those platforms that he was talking about early, Tubi is free. So just sign up for it and get it.
Tubi is free, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But you got to have one of those 5 platforms.
Yeah. YouTube is free as well.
Hopefully.
So. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. And all this information will be in the show notes. So if you're driving and listening to this, you don't have to write everything down. You just go look at the show notes later. We'll have the links to all the social medias and everything. And again, thank you for coming and spending so much time with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has really been a fun conversation with you.
Great. I'm gonna. I'll see you in a couple weeks over at Purchase Street, and I'm gonna shut the recording off here.
September 29th,
Yep.
2 to 5.
2 to 5 or 2 to
Purchase
whenever.
Street Records.
2 to whenever. 2 to 5.
2 to whenever.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't show up at 8, but show up. If you get there at 4:30 and
2
there's
to
a little
5
bit
is
of
the
line,
official time, so
Yeah.
just get there.
just get there. All right. I'm gonna shut this off, but I'm not hanging up. Hold on one second.
Thank you.
Oh, and don't think I didn't catch it when Michael said he didn't get to tell the Leonard Skinner story. Oh, I caught that. We're getting that right after this, and it's going to be on an exclusive for the Patreon subscribers. So if you want to hear the Leonard Skinner story, and I know it's a good one, go check out patreon.com/Big Truth. You can join up there and get the exclusive. All right. Thank you, everybody, and make sure you like, subscribe, leave a review, and share the show. Boom.